The FBI is warning that if you fake a vaccine card, specifically in this case related to the COVID-19 vaccines, that you could go to prison. And journalists are ushering in this message really without questioning if you should have to carry a vaccine card, or if you fake one, whether that should elicit prison time, if that's a fair punishment for that crime, or whether it should be a crime at all. And I figured I'd take this opportunity to discuss how surveillance programs get pushed by mainstream news. In a lot of cases, I think by journalists who are just taking the authority of these particular, in this case, federal law enforcement institutions, taking their word that this is just the way it should be. And I do this video because I am sure in my career in television news that I did this. I'm sure I did. I can't come up with a specific example, but I would be shocked if you could go through my career and say, you know what, Alison? No, you never pushed federal law enforcement surveillance propaganda. So I'm not doing this video to shame my former newsroom from which the story originates or the reporter who did it, because like I said, been there, done that. I'm doing this because I hope if you're a consumer of news, this will help you understand better how these even federal law enforcement talking points end up leaking into your local news coverage, not just national cable newsrooms. But if you're a journalist in a mainstream newsroom, to offer you a different way of looking at this as somebody who's now on the outside. And I will say that while I was in mainstream news, there were a lot of things that I just took as gospel that I shouldn't have, in part because I just lived in a bubble. And a lot of the questions are happening outside of these mainstream newsrooms. And so if you're not engaging with those other worlds of, like, you know, the podcast worlds, the Rockfins and the locals. And I should take this opportunity to plug my other platforms where these conversations are happening. If you're watching this on YouTube, consider switching over to one of my platforms. Links are in the description for how you can support my work over there. Most active on locals. Right now, it's a place where you can even post story ideas for me to do commentary for. So anyway, back to this. If you're not engaging with that content regularly, you're missing out big time. And so I hope that this video gives journalists who might come across it another way of looking at the talking points that we take from these bureaucratic institutions and just assume that they're here to help, okay? That things just should be this way without asking, like, what are the ramifications of this? All right, so let's read this real fast. There's also a video because this was on TV. I'll put the link in the description. You want to watch it, go for it. But I will give you my commentary at the end, as I typically do. I'm just going to read you through some of the key points and talk a little bit about the subtle premises that undergird this way of thinking, okay? Because there are certain accepted realities that are obvious if you disagree, or at least even if you're just questioning this paradigm. There are several premises that undergird this reporting that perhaps people that agree with it don't see that there are accepted realities for which there are challenges that are undergirding the way this is written. Okay, so the title is FBI Warns of Penalties for Faking Vaccine Cards as Washington Lifts Mask Mandates. Carrying a fake vaccine card is a federal crime. The consequences include potential prison time or fines. Now, I'm assuming, okay, that this is not a new thing, okay? That carrying a fake vaccine card, because what they say in this article is that using a federal seal, you know, faking a federal seal is a federal crime. That's basically what's happening here. That this was a reality prior to the COVID-19 vaccines. But of course, this is becoming a talking point right now because there are discussions about what kind of freedoms vaccinated versus unvaccinated people should and can have. Okay, and then how you prove you're vaccinated. So it starts off with the US and Washington lifting most mask mandates for those that are fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Federal officials are warning that faking a vaccine card to claim immunization can carry serious consequences. Now, the first premise here is that being fully vaccinated against COVID-19 should carry with it special priorities. All right, and you'll see this continuing through the article because there's literally no pushback to it. There's no questioning of whether that premise should be the case. Should you have special privileges if you are fully vaccinated against COVID-19? This is actually a federal crime. This is a quote, said Amy Alexander, a public affairs officer for the FBI in Seattle. It's called misuse of a government seal, and it comes with potential prison time and or fines. Now, there are usually a couple ways that somebody like Amy Alexander ends up on the news. The first is that in an editorial meeting or maybe during the day, a reporter says, we should do a story about fake vaccine cards, and pitches it, and the boss says, sure, go ahead, find the public affairs officer, you get the statement from them, and you put your story together. It's quick. They just did like a Skype or a Zoom interview. You didn't even have to leave the office, probably. You have the B-roll already, or maybe you left to get some shots of random people out at a park, which it appears that they did. Or Amy Alexander, who works for the FBI in Seattle, pitches the story to the newsroom. Now, this is something that happens on a regular basis, and it's a way for government agencies to push the news cycle in the direction they want it to go. Hey, here's a story that'll fill your newscast. So check. We like that in the news business, especially in TV news, because the cycle moves so fast. We have 4 hours a day really to do something, to get something collected and together. Maybe 6 if you're lucky. They send you a press release, or they give you a call. Hey, we got this idea. Why don't you do it? And you're like, sure, great. That gives me a story for tomorrow. I don't have to wake up at 6:30 in the morning to comb through the internet and find a story idea. I got one for tomorrow. Without even questioning, like, why are they calling me? Why do they want me to talk about this particular issue? What's the point? What message are they trying to get across? Is there a counterpoint to this? No. Okay. Carrying on. That can carry a penalty of up to 5 years in prison. Reports have emerged in recent weeks of a bar selling fake vaccine cards, and 45 state attorney generals have condemned fake cards. Alexander warned forging that document for access to an event or gathering could carry other consequences as well. Quote, we really want to stress, do not buy these cards. Do not sell these cards. Do not print them out online. She said, because when you are unvaccinated and you're using a fake card, you're really putting yourself as the unvaccinated person at risk, okay? That's what this says. Now, 2 quick things here. First off, all right, so besides the fact that they're like basically pushing that, this is a crime, there's no pushback as to whether this should be a crime. Whether this is a good law or not a good law, whether this violates people's civil rights, there's no question about that. But then also she's telling you that you shouldn't take a risk because, see, if you use one of these fake cards, besides the prison and all that stuff, and that you would then be a federal criminal, that you are putting yourself at risk, and you don't want to do that, right? I mean, the federal government is telling you don't put yourself at risk if you're unvaccinated. All right, so that's the second thing, that you are just at risk if you're unvaccinated, and that the FBI is telling you this. Amy Alexander, who I'm sure has extensive training in vaccine science and is aware of the pushback of the concerns of the COVID-19 vaccine, okay, a little bit of sarcasm here, is telling you that you're taking a risk if you use one of these fake cards. Okay, let's just continuing on, right? No pushback about, like, what does Amy Alexander know? What does this person know about the science behind this, about whether, hey, there's concerns that if you recently had COVID, you shouldn't get the vaccine. All these things. So she's just telling you you're at risk because she works for the FBI. All right. Continuing on. COVID vaccines are free, and you will be supplied a CDC proof of vaccination card at your appointment. Shots are available through Washington's vaccine locator. Okay, so basically pushing you to go get the vaccine. They're free. All right, remember that. And you'll get a vaccination card so you can prove it to everybody. And this is where you can get your vaccine. Now, state officials continue to campaign to vaccinate Washingtonians. At a Thursday press conference announcing mask rollbacks, Governor Jay Inslee called the shot a ticket to freedom and said the state is on track to fully reopen by June 30th. Okay, once again, there's no questioning as to whether a vaccine should be a ticket to freedom. No pushback. All right, we're just accepting that the governor says that you shouldn't get your freedoms really unless you you get the vaccine. I mean, that, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it seems to say that, like, the shot, quote, is a ticket to freedom. All right, so you don't get the ticket to freedom unless you get the shot, and that there's just no pushback to that. Okay, he urged residents to get vaccinated. Right now, almost 44% of people above the age of 16 are fully vaccinated, and 57% have at least one shot. Inslee said he hopes to speed reopening timelines if 70% of those above 16 are immunized. But officials had voiced concern in recent weeks that rates of vaccination are dipping. Okay, officials have voiced concerns in recent weeks that rates of vaccination are dipping. So, who are these officials, and who do they work for, and why are they concerned, and why are people not getting vaccinated? Where are the thoughts on that? I mean, where's the, it's just, there's so many questions here, and I've said before that I was actually told I was not allowed to pitch stories about vaccines anymore after number one, questioning the flu shot, and all that was just a very generalized, like, shouldn't we tell people something else besides get your flu shot during flu season? Like, not that we, if you want to tell people that, fine, but we could offer other options like vitamin D, for instance. That was one. And then I also pitched a conference of doctors and scientists who were getting together during Washington's legislative debate over what kind of regulations schools should have for kids and vaccinations. And there was an actual conference of doctors who I guess you would call it vaccine safety advocates, okay? And so I thought, hey, this would be an opportunity to interview people besides just having folks screaming at protests. This would be an opportunity to actually interview medical professionals. And I was then, after that, that was enough. That tipped the Titanic, and I was told that no more was I allowed to pitch stories about vaccines. Okay, so this is a topic that maybe I wouldn't have been allowed to have been on. I'm not quite sure, but this is just to say that, like, there are plenty of scientists, doctors, whatever, who would have an issue with this. Not just like Jenny McCarthy. Okay, there are actually people who would question, not just the safety of the vaccines, especially for certain kinds of people right now, and the unknowns about the vaccines. These are fair debate questions to have, but also whether they should be tied to civil liberties. Okay, that's a totally next level conversation, and that's what this is really about. This is really about whether civil liberties, freedom should be tied to health choices. And that's something, when you're pushing FBI talking points about prison time related to all of this, to this topic, that we should be having, in my opinion, we should be including in the story. Because basically this whole story is like, hey, number one, Washington wants you to get vaccinated so we can reopen, okay? And you're holding us back if you're not. That's very clear in this article. Number two, if you fake it, you could go to prison. And we're not going to really question whether you should or shouldn't. We're just going to say that that's a thing, okay? So just be aware. All right, to finish it up, Inslee added the state does not intend to make people prove vaccination. Okay, that's interesting. So there's like a little bit of a nugget there that, like, maybe that is something people are concerned about, but that's all you're going to get, really. Quote, we are not intending to create a state licensing system for vaccinations, Inslee said. Businesses will have the discretion in how they handle their operations in that regard. Similarly, he said private businesses can still require masks indoors beyond the state guidance. So now I want to show you a quick excerpt from a book that specifically looks at how routine news gathering, rather than the boogeyman behind the curtain, has a far greater influence on news coverage. May I direct our attention to Manufacturing the News by Mark Fishman. I'm just going to read you a little bit out of this, okay? News organizations cover the world mainly through beats, which tend to route reporters exclusively through governmental agencies and corporate bureaucracies in their search for the news. Go a little further down here. Reporters under daily deadlines come to depend on these organizations for the predictable, steady flow of raw news material they provide. Okay, scroll down just a little bit more. Journalists participate in this system by publicizing bureaucratic reality as hard fact, while accounts from other sources are treated as unconfirmed reports, which cannot be published without time-consuming investigation. He's absolutely correct to point out that these bureaucracies, big corporations, institutions are treated as confirmed if they say something, versus the outside voice that challenges them. It's like, no, now we have to confirm that with secondary material. Okay. So you're the government. We often would say, did we confirm it with the health department? Did we confirm it with the police department? But if it's like an outside voice challenging, it's like, well, now we have to confirm what you're saying. It's not just what you're saying is just confirmed on its own. Is that now we need secondary material? Like we need to see the numbers. We need to see the data. We need to see the documents to see if you're really trying to pull the wool over our eyes. But that's not a treatment that we give to those bureaucracies. So that's a really important point to see. And then if you have to do that extra legwork with these outside voices and you don't have the time to do that legwork, well, guess who doesn't end up on the news, right? And so you can see how this is a self-perpetuating cycle and how reporters, because of just sort of these assumptions, because of these world views, these paradigms just undergird the way they're thinking of things, and the lack of time and resources to sit back and question them, and just the lack of alternative voices and diversity of voices in these newsrooms. They're just pushing this stuff, perhaps not even realizing what they're doing. So I'm curious what you all think, not just about the specific topic of the vaccine cards and whether you should go to prison if you fake one, but also what you think about this idea of lending authority to government institutions, for instance. What do you think about that if you're a journalist? Don't forget, besides commenting, like, share, subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, but also consider moving to one of my other platforms. Again, just a plug for those. The links are in the description, and I'll see you next time.